We've once again made it to the end of the week, and with it being Friday, those of you who are familiar with the channel should know what time it is. About a month ago, I started a series called Your Take, Not Mine, where once a week, every Friday, I turn to you guys, the viewers, to give me your hottest takes of the NBA for the week, and I then choose either the most interesting or my favorite ones to discuss in a video. I made a community post this morning, so in the future, make sure to keep an eye out for posts like that if you want to be involved and have a chance to be featured in a video. Before we start though, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel, as all support is very much appreciated. Now with that being said, let's begin. The first take we'll be discussing comes to us from Alex, and he says that the Minnesota Timberwolves will finish as the worst team in the West next season. At first, this take did actually seem pretty hot, because the Wolves do have a roster filled with promising talent and should definitely be set to improve next year. Karl-Anthony Towns is one of the best offensive big men in the NBA, the team will have D'Angelo Russell for an entire year, Malik Beasley showed huge improvement in his short stint on the team last year, and they have the #1 pick in the draft joining them, all of which is very exciting moving forward. However, when you look a little deeper into the situation, you realize that the Wolves were the second worst team in the conference this year, and the only team that was below them were the injury-plagued Warriors, who are due to get right back into playoff contention. So going into next year, they're going to have to leap somebody in order to get out of the basement, and that's not going to be easy. Teams ahead of them include the Pelicans, Spurs, Suns, Grizzlies, and Kings, all of which are trying to make the playoffs. If I had to guess, the Kings might be the ones to fall apart and be below Minnesota next year, but ultimately this take isn't as far-fetched as one might think. The West is a loaded conference, and top to bottom, there really aren't any genuinely bad teams. The next take we'll be discussing comes to us from Choi, and he says that Luka Doncic stat pads just like Russell Westbrook. Okay, so anyone who follows the NBA even slightly closely has probably heard the narrative of Russell Westbrook being a stat padder, and the idea comes as a result of him going out of his way to secure a ton of rebounds and get a ridiculous amount of triple-doubles. This was especially the case in the last 3 seasons of his Thunder days, where he managed to average a triple-double throughout the entire span, but after simultaneously getting eliminated in the first round each of those 3 seasons, the numbers eventually stopped impressing people, and as a result, they called his production empty, hence the reputation as a stat padder. I personally don't fully agree with the idea that Russ stat pads, but I do understand why people would think that way. Numbers from those seasons have actually shown that the Thunder's offense did actually operate at a more effective rate when Russ was the one that grabbed the rebound, because it allowed him to immediately push the pace and pressure the defense, which is where he's always been most effective, whereas if someone else grabbed the rebound, they would have to then slow down to get the ball to Russ before they can get going. Now relating this back to the take at hand, yes, Luka and the Mavericks have in a sense designed a similar system where they allow Luka to go out of his way to grab more rebounds as a guard, because again, it's just the smart thing for the team to do. Luka, like Russ, is a terrific rebounder of the basketball for a guard, and the team does benefit when he's the one that pulls it down, because it allows them to attack faster, creating more easy baskets. In part, I agree that Luka stat pads the numbers, but I disagree with the idea of it being a negative thing, because Luka's production absolutely correlates to improving the team as a whole. The next take we'll be discussing comes from Evan, and he says that Jamal Murray is not a top 8 point guard in the NBA. 8's kind of a random number, so let's just make it 10, and then we can go from there. I've discussed Murray in a bunch of recent videos, but again, throughout the majority of Murray's career, he's been an inconsistent scoring guard. His talent has always been clear as day, yet the production wasn't always at the level it needed to be, and his consistency was worrying. One game he's about to drop 30, then the next game he'll go out and drop 10, and for a while that was the Jamal Murray experience. However, everything changed in this year's playoffs, where he really started to put everything together and had several big-time performances on the big stage en route to helping lead the Nuggets to the conference finals. Before the playoffs started, he was nowhere near the top 10 conversation for point guards in the league, but afterwards, there's a conversation to be had for sure. To throw out some names of players that are usually in the top 10 debate, there are guys like Steph Curry, Damian Lillard, Russell Westbrook, Kyrie Irving, Ben Simmons, Chris Paul, Kyle Lowry, Luka Doncic, Doncic, Trae Young, Kemba Walker, and Jamal Murray all being in the mix. Those are 11 guys, so Murray will have to establish himself as better than at least 2 of them to crack the top 10 and 4 of them to crack the top 8. Right now, it's probably fair to have him above guys like Jamal Murray and Trae Young because of his production coming in the playoffs where it's more meaningful, but he will need to continue this hot streak and carry it over into next season to solidify this status. The next take we'll be discussing comes from Luke, and he says that Kevin Durant will not be a top 20 player next year and that the Nets are overrated, but I didn't necessarily pick this one because of the validity of the statement, which sounds just ridiculous, but more so for the discussion around Durant and the Nets overall. Durant, when healthy, was one of the 3 best players in the NBA, but after suffering a torn Achilles in the finals of 2019, there really is no guarantee he gets back to his former self. Achilles injuries have been problematic for several big-time players over the NBA's history, and 2 recent examples include Kobe Bryant back in 2013 and DeMarcus Cousins in 2018. Neither Kobe nor Cousins would ever look like their former selves after the injuries, which is obviously worrisome for the Nets, who invested heavily in bringing Kevin Durant in. The reward for doing so is obviously potentially getting a top 3 player in the league and multiple-time champion, but at 32 years old, there's no telling how much longer he plays at a high level and how his health will hold up. Plus, pairing him with Kyrie Irving will also be interesting to see, because Kyrie's also been someone who has struggled to stay healthy throughout an entire season in recent years. The Nets will likely be the favorites to win the East next year, according to odds makers in the preseason, but a lot of it will come down to factors that are by no means a guarantee. Durant may not be as good as he once was, and Irving has been known to bring problems of his own, but at the same time, their talent is still good enough to feel confident in them as a duo. And finally, the last take we'll be discussing is from Raheem, and he says that PJ Tucker is more important to the Rockets than Kemba Walker is to the Celtics. Now, the key word here is important, because he's not talking about who the better player is. Value comes in all sorts of different parts of the game, and being a better player doesn't always result in being the more valuable player or the more important player. PJ Tucker is at the center of so many things the Rockets did this season, and when they abandoned big men in the rotation, it was his ability to hold his own against any player at any size that made it work. The Rockets' defense was actually surprisingly strong after they traded away Clint Capella, and that's because Tucker works his ass off to hold his own in the middle. He's versatile, he spaces the floor, and he's tough as nails, and even though he's not an all-star caliber player, he is incredibly important to his team's success. Kemba Walker is also important to the Celtics, don't get me wrong, but the Celtics have a bunch of scorers and shot creators on the roster, and in the games that Kemba missed this season, it wasn't necessarily blatant that they were missing him, so I actually kind of agree with this take. And with that being said, that's all I have for you today. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below what you think about the topics discussed today. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.